Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Jamf After Dark podcast, a podcast to introduce you to the people at Jamf, learn about what we're up to when it comes to managing and securing Apple devices, along with what's happening in the IT landscape. I'm your co-host, Kat Garbus, joined by co-host, wonderful person, Josh Thornton.
Good afternoon, Kat. How are you handling the change in time?
I woke up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm not a morning person, so this fall back I do well with. It's the spring forward I struggle with, so I'm going to be grateful I woke up ready to conquer the world today. How about you?
I'm the exact same. I am great at falling back. I excel at getting an extra hour. My kids, on the other hand, they haven't figured that out yet. And my dog, she still expects to get fed at the exact same time. But for me personally, waking up and it being sunny already is certainly a plus.
Yes, the pets. Arlo, my golden retriever, he was barking for dinner at 4 p.m. And I was like, no, we have to wait because then you're going to be hungry again at like 10 o'clock. So I guess everyone's coping well, unless they're an animal. They're kindly reminding us of when they want their snacks and demanding it, as cute as can be. Um, Josh, who's here with us today? As much as I want to talk about the time change with you, I think we've got some other things to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today it's almost a continuation of October Cybersecurity Month as we're thinking about the software we're all running and making sure that it's up to date, free of vulnerabilities, and running smoothly. We're really excited. We've got a Jamf partner, a friend of Jamf, joining us today. And that's John Britton of Workbrew. John, can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hello. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is John Britton. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workbrew. Just a little bit about me, my background. I'm a software engineer by training. I spent most of my career working on developer tools. I'm very passionate about developer experience, and we're building Workbrew to help developers in the enterprise stay safe and secure while still having access to all of the tools they need to do their jobs.
I love it. It was so nice to meet you at JNUC. Curious, where are you based out of? How did Workbrew come to be?
Well, as far as where I'm based, I'm kind of all over the place. So I have a history as a nomad. I spent about 10 years traveling around the world every 3 months to a different country. I'm currently in Valencia, Spain, where I spend some time during the winter, but I go back and forth between Western Massachusetts and Europe all the time. So as far as where Workbrew came from, as I mentioned, my background's in developer tools. I'm a Mac user. If you're a developer on a Mac, you've probably heard of Homebrew, the open source package manager. I'm a big Homebrew user. I've contributed to Homebrew, and the origin of Workbrew is just looking at large companies and seeing how they're using Homebrew and trying to find solutions to their problems. So we can get into more of the details on how we came to be, but really it came out of just looking to the needs of large enterprises, companies where security and compliance is important, and talking to them about their developer experience and giving them what they needed.
Let's like really get into the nitty gritty on that. Because I know some of our listeners may be familiar with Homebrew and Workbrew. And the nice thing about this podcast, some people are hearing about this for the first time and they're like, what's that? So when you say like, hey, we wanted to address, some of the issues at hand and make things easier, can you give us some detail around that so our listeners who are hearing about Workbrew and Homebrew for the first time, can you kind of give a little bit more information for them?
Sure. So the first thing to talk about is, Homebrew. What is Homebrew and why is it important in the Mac ecosystem? So Homebrew is what's called a package manager. It's essentially an app store for developers where you can get access to all of the tools that devs need to do their jobs, whether that's open source software, desktop applications, drivers, fonts, you name it. Homebrew is a community-run open source project with thousands of contributors and a mighty team of several dozen maintainers. It's widely popular. It's used on over 30 million Macs. It's daily usage in the millions of developers. It's a very, very popular tool. And there's something on the order of 15,000 packages in the official software library of Homebrew. So Homebrew originally started about 16 years ago, around the time that GitHub rose to popularity. And one of the key differentiators about Homebrew as a package manager is it was very, very easy to contribute packages to the project. And one of the reasons why it was easy was that it was all hosted on GitHub. So at the time when Homebrew was originating, like that was something that people hadn't seen before, and it really led to a lot of growth. And so now Homebrew is kind of the industry standard package manager on Mac OS. If you're using an Apple device and you're a developer, I would be willing to bet that you're probably using Homebrew. Now, for the IT admins in the audience who may not have heard of Homebrew or have heard of it and they might not have used it before, it's often something that causes some stress and anxiety around, hey, how do I make sure that everything that's coming from this tool is safe? And so we can talk about kind of how we solve some of those problems. But really, the foundation is Homebrew, the open source package manager, and it's used pretty much by anybody writing software on Mac OS.
Yeah, I was thinking back as we were planning for this chat today and thinking, what did that experience look like before Homebrew? And like remembering downloading code and having to compile it myself. And, as I'm downloading some of these open source tools, and now being able to pop open terminal and quickly install a third-party tool in some cases, just a matter of seconds is so incredibly powerful. It increases my productivity beyond belief. And the one thing, though, I will say is I ran in today and I said, you know what? I should probably update Homebrew and upgrade some of these packages. And the list that it gave me that needed to be updated was kind of scary. It's probably been months and months since I last did that. So there is, I think, reason for concern from our IT admins as they're trying to make sure that their fleet is secure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there's another thing that's worth mentioning here is that, there are lots of package managers out there, and you've probably heard of many different like language package managers. Homebrew is quite distinct from those language package managers in that it's more oriented towards being a system package manager. So you can look at something like Ubuntu and apt as a comparable rather than something like npm, which would be like a language package manager for JavaScript. What's interesting about Mac OS is there's no official system package manager. I think the closest thing in the ecosystem would be like Apple's App Store. But as you know, there's kind of an approval process to get software in there. It's expected that every piece of software has an application and it has like an icon and you can click on it. There's not a lot of developer tooling capabilities in the Mac App Store. So there's definitely a need in the ecosystem for something like this. And then also with the origin, I think that the origin story of Homebrew is kind of interesting, or essentially like package managers on Mac OS. There were and there still are other package managers on Mac OS, even some that have been funded or otherwise supported by Apple in the past. But really, Homebrew kind of took the lead and has been the de facto for a very long time.
What would you say are some of the primary benefits, and how does it address some of the challenges out there that organizations are facing?
So first, the benefits of Homebrew are like pretty straightforward. Everything the developer could need, all of those tools are available at their fingertips. Run one command, brew install whatever you want, and it's there. And I wouldn't say that Homebrew is inherently insecure. As compared to other package managers, all of the packages in the Homebrew official repositories are, reviewed. Those packages are reviewed by humans before they're added. You can't just come along and create a new package in the Homebrew ecosystem because you feel like it. Someone looks at all of those things.
That's good to know. Sorry to interrupt. That's good to know because especially with open source, I know there's some folks that are like, open source, whoa. And it's good to know it's reviewed, because I know every time I find something on an open source, if it's not reviewed or, screened, we'll say, before it goes out there, you could accidentally put something not so good in your environment or something not compatible. And who knows who attached what to something. So really great to hear that all of that is screened prior to being released out into the everyone.
It's not a perfect defense. There's still potential for there to be issues with the supply chain, but they're vastly reduced, around certain kinds of attacks like name squatting or typo squatting, where people create a package that has almost the exact same name. Like those types of things would never pass like human review. But there's still the potential that some open source software is vulnerable, and that's beyond the scope of the package manager to make sure that that's safe. But what I will add is that Homebrew was built originally as like a single player tool. So you install it on your own Mac, you configure it how you want, you drive, you install the things, you update them, you upgrade them. And a challenge really arises when you have lots of Macs and lots of tasks going on and on around installing and updating and keeping things in sync. And the more Macs that you add into your environment, the more challenges that you begin to face. And it's not because there's an inherent security flaw or anything wrong with Homebrew. It more has to do with governance and policy and making sure that there are workflows around how developers and how your users get access to new software. And so when we went out to the market and started talking to large enterprises and companies that are in regulated industries and places where they have high security compliance needs, and we asked them like, hey, do you use Homebrew? They all said yes. But then they came back with we have a couple of different ways that we handle it. One is we kind of just look the other way. Another option that they have is that they write some documentation. So like trust-based security. Like we tell you what the policy is, but we don't have anybody to enforce it. And then the last kind of category of usage is around those very large companies who have lots and lots of resources where they've essentially built their own internal open source tooling to govern Homebrew. And so what we learned was that those were the big motivators, security and compliance and governance around what software is available, keeping it up to date, getting visibility and those types of things. And that's how we built Workbrew, is just trying to build out those types of functionalities for the end user.
Yeah, and I think more and more organizations are really looking at whether it's a specific regulation that they have to adhere to or a compliance standard, or maybe it's a certain certification they want because it's useful for them as they're getting new customers. And they can say, hey, we're certified in X, Y, and Z. And so being able to prove out the processes and controls that they have in place for their fleet is super important. And so when you set out to build Workbrew to address some of these challenges, what are the ways that Workbrew solves some of these pain points?
So I would broadly kind of bucket the functionality of Workbrew into four main categories. The first is around deployment. So how do we get Brew installed onto these devices in a standard way? And how do we get like some set of packages installed on these devices in a standard way? The second is around visibility. What's going on our endpoints? What software are people using? Are they on the latest versions? What do we do if there's something that's not up to our bar of quality or bar of security or otherwise? The third is remote management. So the ability to take action in the Brew ecosystem on the devices. That's things like upgrading software, installing software, removing software that shouldn't be there. And then lastly, security and compliance, which has to do with being alerted when there are known vulnerabilities in any of the software, having automations around patching vulnerabilities, doing things like setting up policies so there are guardrails around the processes of what software can be installed and what software can be used in your environment, and things like doing kind of configuration as code so that you have like a workflow for how people get access to the software. And so you're essentially making your team more secure without taking away the benefit that they have of innovation. I hear this all the time from like big companies. We don't want to block things right away by default because that stops people from innovating. We want to give them access to the tools, but we want to have some kind of a workflow around it so that we know when new tools are introduced. So broadly, it's those kind of areas, and we can get into more detail about how it works and things like that. But really, the benefit is a standard way to approach this problem. And the first kind of pass is organizations where there are already software engineers on macOS devices using Homebrew today. So 90% of our customers, when they come in the door, they're already using Homebrew and they're saying, hey, how can I get my hands around this problem? I want to make sure we're secure and compliant. We need to meet this security standard. We have this kind of data laws or whatever we're trying to meet. And then over time, it becomes, wow, this is really a great tool for just installing any software on macOS. Can we use this on devices that are not for developers? And that's been getting more and more popular recently.
You kind of touched on this a moment ago, and I think it's a good segue. You touched on security teams. Like, if we were to, as like just a little hint of it, but if we were to kind of elaborate on that a bit more, like, how would you say it is helping admins and security teams through that lens?
Sure. And I think there's like a little bit broader of a impact. So we think about it in terms of personas. There are three major stakeholders in every company with relation to Workbrew. One is the software engineer. One is the IT leader, AKA a Mac admin, right? Like the folks that are very, very active in this community. And then there's the security professional. Maybe it's the CISO, maybe it's like a security auditor or something like that. And so in the case of the security folks, the benefit to them and how we help them is giving them visibility into what software is installed so that when they know about a vulnerability, they can pinpoint exactly which devices have it. They can audit. They have a history. They have a log of when it was there, when it was fixed, all that kind of stuff. But we also give them peace of mind. Because really what ends up happening every time I see Workbrew get adopted in a company, it's obviously the developers love it. They already use it every day. They're used to it. It's part of their normal workflow. So there's not really a whole lot of things that have to be done for them today to continue to use Workbrew because it's transparent to them. Then it's the security folks that come along and say, hey, this looks like a big risk. What are we going to do about this big risk? How can we mitigate it? And then it becomes the Mac admin's job to find the solution. And so we end up talking to lots of Mac admins and they're saying like, hey, my security controller or whoever it is at their company said, we can't have an exception for Homebrew anymore. We need to have some kind of like clear security policy. And so the things that they get are governance, what software is allowed, what software is not, supply chain security. So they know all of the stuff that they're installing via Brew is coming from a trusted source. We can help them with things like digital signatures on packages and verifying them and ensuring that they're verified before they're installed. And it gives them things like automations and workflows around, major security events like vulnerabilities. So if you see a package that's known to be vulnerable, with Workbrew, 15 minutes goes by and you can be patched across your entire fleet, right? You get an alert. It says there was a vulnerability. The upstream vendor has produced a patch for it. That patch is available in Homebrew because there's thousands of contributors keeping things up to date all the time. And then we run an automation across your fleet that says upgrade this. And then you get a notification that says we've patched it for you. So it's like a really, really useful and clean way to make sure that you're staying up to date and patching those vulnerabilities in a timely manner.
And help me connect the dots. How is this either integrating with Jamf or enhancing what Jamf is already doing? Because I don't know if there's just some overlap or like what are some of the differences? Like what is Workbrew building on and how is it integrating with Jamf? That'd be really helpful to get some clarity there.
So we're a Jamf partner and we've had a lot of opportunities to work together with Jamf. I've gone to events. I was at JNUC last year. I was at JNUC this year. I went to the Tokyo office last year in April. We had a user group meet up there, which was really, really awesome. But in terms of integration, the way that our products work together is that Jamf is kind of the deployment mechanism for how Workbrew gets onto the machines. So for our customers, when they adopt Workbrew, we give them a deployment guide that shows them step-by-step how to roll out Workbrew to their devices. It's very, very easy. And they can either push Workbrew out to the devices using Jamf or put it into Jamf self-service so that the end users can say, I need to use Brew. My company's policy around how I use Brew is to get it from Jamf and get it via Workbrew in Jamf. So this is like the bootstrapping mechanism, how to get Brew onto the machine and make sure that they're getting the right version of Brew on the machine. There have been some supply chain attacks in the past against Brew where bad actors have created malware sites that mimic the official website of Homebrew. And then they've bought like Google ads against search terms to try and target people. So this is a way that telling your team Brew is allowed, but you need to get it through Jamf. You need to get it through self-service. They're guaranteed to get, Workbrew and be connected to the right sources and avoid any kind of like supply chain attack that way. Besides that integration of installation, the other thing is around management. So a lot of our functionality is around setting policies or taking actions on devices. And we allow you to take actions on individual devices, on sets of devices or device groups, and also on the entire fleet as a whole. And if you have a lot of devices, managing device groups in another tool is not that great of a use of time. So we have an integration with Jamf where we'll pull in all of your existing Jamf device groups. So immediately, once you set up Workbrew for the first time, all of the inventory data that's in Jamf is already synced into Workbrew. It has all the same names, and things like our default package feature where you can set up, different personas: software engineer, data scientist, maybe like someone in a non-developer role, have different sets of packages that need to be installed by default. Well, with Jamf and Workbrew together, whenever a new device is added to Jamf, that data will automatically sync over to Workbrew. Workbrew will be installed on the device, and all of the packages will be installed automatically. So it really is a tool that, eliminates work for the IT admin. It makes things much faster, much simpler. A lot of times I talk to teams where they actually package their software themselves. So there's lots and lots of packages in Homebrew. Let's say, for example, like Python or OpenSSL or Postgres. And if those developers want access to that software, their current process is to go to their Jamf admin, get them to take the binaries from Homebrew, create a self-service entry in Jamf, and then make that available as the way to install. And this is like real world stuff from banks. Like developers in banks have it kind of the worst. So they have to go through this like really, really complicated process to get these open source dependencies onto their machines. And then the Mac admins at those banks are tasked with updating every time there's an update, and they have to maintain those packages. And so what we're able to do is say, well, you already have your MDM. We're integrated with Jamf. More than half of our customers are Jamf customers, right? Like Jamf is the top MDM that people are using in the Workbrew ecosystem. And basically when they add a device to Jamf, it automatically syncs up with Workbrew and gets all the developer tools installed on it automatically, which is another one of the benefits. Those three categories of people: engineers, IT admins, and security. It actually benefits all of them. For the engineers, it's I don't need to go read a README and go through 10 different steps to get my dependencies. They just show up automatically, right? For the IT admin, it's I don't need to repackage this and keep it updated. And for the security folks, it's we know that this is coming from a trusted source.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was thinking just around the productivity gains for these different categories of personas, and it's substantial, especially as soon as you start digging into creating custom packages for frequently used tools. That can take a lot of time. And so being able to use a tool like Workbrew is not only going to make your IT teams very happy because they can get all that time back, it also just keeps your software engineers more productive and focused on the work that they actually want to do. I don't think most software engineers get into that type of job saying, I can't wait to keep all of my package dependencies up to date. That's not a highlight of their day. So that's awesome.
So you also mentioned like private, like keeping their own packages up to date. So there's another kind of advanced Workbrew feature, advanced Homebrew feature. So Homebrew, the way it's structured, it has something called a tap. There's all these kind of like jargony terms in Homebrew, but a tap is essentially a repository that contains packages. So Homebrew has two official taps. One is called Homebrew Core, and another is called Homebrew Cask. Together, they have about 15,000 packages in them. But anybody in the world can create a tap. And anybody in the world can create a package and publish that package globally and make it available to anyone. So with Homebrew, your software engineers, your brew users can add any third-party tap to their system and install any arbitrary software off the internet. So with Workbrew, we give you visibility into all the taps that are in use. So you can say, these are the trusted sources, the official Homebrew taps, maybe a tap from Microsoft, maybe a tap from some other companies that you trust. And then any, unknown taps would be by default not available, and your engineers could request access to them. You could vet them and then add them to your environment. But the other thing that's like an advanced, tool here that a lot of folks in regulated industries are finding use in is the ability to publish your own internal tap. So the idea is that maybe you work in a company where you have some command line tools, data analysis tools, internal functions, whatnot, and you need a way to get those tools onto all of your devices. Well, you could stand up your own kind of release mechanism, your own kind of installer. You can make your own self-service entries, etc. Or you could just package them up with Brew and make them available via private tap and do Brew install and have them installed. And then that works with all of the kind of policies and stuff we have built in. And what's really nice about this is the process of getting private packages distributed within your organization has one kind of complicated step, which is authenticating each endpoint device with the source of the package, where you're getting it, the tap. And so what you would need to do with Homebrew is to essentially generate some kind of an access token on a per device basis and set that, have a way to roll it if it's compromised, and or you could have a shared credential across many devices, which has its own problems. So with Workbrew, what we've done is we've made it so you can build your own repository of packages, a tap, publish them, connect it to Workbrew, and we handle all that authentication for you automatically and distribute it to all of your devices so that you can do your internal software catalog to your devices as well.
That's awesome. I probably have a million questions. I know we're eventually going to run out of time. I want to dig in a little bit on the impact to that software engineer, because you were talking about deployment and how easy it is if they are opening up that fresh Mac out of the box, automatically enrolled in Jamf, gets Workbrew installed, pulls in all of the pieces of software that they need. But we also know, as you mentioned, a lot of software developers, maybe we can just say most, are already likely using Homebrew. So what does that experience look like if I've got a team of software engineers that have been using Homebrew themselves, and I want to now bring Workbrew into the mix to add some of the benefits around visibility and peace of mind and compliance and everything?
So the philosophy here is don't mess with a good thing. So Homebrew works very well, and developers love it. When you deploy Workbrew to your fleet, you can deploy it to a brand new device, and it will just be up and running, and you'll get Brew and all the things you would expect. But if you have an existing device with Homebrew installed already, and maybe dozens or hundreds of packages, and you upgrade it to Workbrew, our goal is for the upgrade to be transparent to the end user. So in Brew, Homebrew, there's this theme of like a beer mug. So you'll see on your terminal, you'll see like a little beer mug emoji every time you run a brew command. When you install Workbrew, it changes to a coffee cup. And that's essentially the extent of what you'll see as a developer in the differences. The command line is exactly the same. And the reason it's exactly the same is it's literally the exact same code. From an implementation perspective, the architecture of our system is that when we install Brew on their device, what we do is we create a secure CLI, the Workbrew CLI, which is a wrapper around Homebrew. And so every time the user invokes Brew, what's actually happening is they're invoking Workbrew, and then Workbrew parses their command, make sure it's in line with policies. And then if it's something that is permitted and available on the device, we pass it through to Homebrew so it runs the exact same code path. And so what this leads to is essentially it's identical. Users don't need to log into anything. They don't need to change any of their workflows. It just works exactly as they would expect, and it transparently can be upgraded. So we get a lot of questions during the deployment phase of Workbrew, or like the evaluation phase of, how long is this going to take me to roll out to my fleet? And you can roll it out to hundreds of devices in an hour. It doesn't take very long.
Sort of piggybacking off that, and maybe it's almost the same question. If it is, let us know if we missed it. But that jump then from Workbrew to Homebrew for developers to Workbrew for the entire company and benefits, would love to just kind of, I get a few, like maybe top 2, top 3, what that looks like at a high level.
I mean, for the developer, it's oftentimes that they have the ability to use Brew at all. So especially in regulated companies, I've worked with banks, I've worked with, insurance companies and things like that, where they have a policy internally that Brew is not allowed because it's not a trusted source for them. It's not an approved source. And so the key benefit to engineers is that Brew is an approved source. You can use it, and it's fully supported. It's a paved road, and your team can lean into it. You don't have to kind of like fly under the radar. From an IT and a security perspective, it's really, peace of mind that where the software is coming from, you have visibility into it, and you have the ability to kind of manage, what's happening on the device. One of the really big things that our customers like about Workbrew is that we can actually support standard users on macOS. So typically, software engineers have access to sudo on their Mac devices. And, I don't have an opinion. I don't, tell our customers what they should or shouldn't do. I'm a developer. I want sudo access on my device. That's what I expect. But unfortunately, in some environments, it's just not allowed. And in those environments, using Homebrew can be a real struggle because Homebrew is built for a single user who installs it on their machine, and they're expected to have sudo privileges. Workbrew out of the box works for a standard user. So this is a really, really big gain for the engineer and for the company as a whole, that if you're in an environment where you don't have the ability to get admin privileges, or you don't have like an enterprise privilege management, or one of those kinds of tools available to you, then you can still use Brew just fine. So that's a couple other benefits to those folks.
Yeah, I love that you have that solution for folks who are running as standard users. I think, being a longtime Mac user, it scares me, to not have admin access and not be able to run sudo in the terminal. But we know that it's an inherent risk. How much is that risk worth? Hard to say. Probably depends on a lot of things, but there is some risk involved in using Jamf. With Jamf for Mac, for instance, we have privilege elevation as one of those tools where if you need to elevate your access for a period of time, you can. But it's really nice to know that if you're using Workbrew, that concern is gone. You can still continue to get your work done without having to reach for that button every time you need to install or update a tool.
I had a large banking customer come to me talking about EPM tools, privilege escalation tools. And they said that when they go through their audit logs of why people are elevating privileges on the Macs, over 80% of the cases were to do Brew oriented commands. So we're able to tell them, hey, look, if really Brew is the last thing on the device that's requiring you to keep sudo around, with Workbrew, you can use it as a standard user just fine. And the benefit to the end user developer is that the experience using Workbrew as a standard user is exactly the same as using Homebrew as an admin, right? Like, it just works.
Yeah, and then I see there's the benefit if 80% of their requests to become an admin are related to running that command, and you're getting rid of that, all of a sudden their logs, their telemetry becomes much more impactful, because they can actually see what's going on and when those other use cases are. And pretty soon you can really clean that up, and hopefully have policies in place that your users don't have to request access and very much at all, which is huge. Now, as we've seen, of course, here at Jamf, so many organizations, they get a handful of folks who love their Mac, and it slowly starts to spread, which is great, because everybody's had, ultimately really positive experiences with Mac OS, and we want to make sure that we can continue to embrace that. Can you talk to us about that trend? What have you seen around enterprise adoption of that device choice and folks choosing Apple and Mac?
So from my perspective, Apple devices are the choice of creative professionals. So whether you're an engineer and you come from a Unix background and you've used those types of systems, Apple in OS X, when they did the Unix underpinnings kind of move, was a really smart choice, because now you have all of the niceties of a Unix environment, but with drivers that just work out of the box. Like, I can't believe that it's been so many years and I'm still like, oh my gosh, it's just a system that works, right? It works as you'd expect. It's really easy to configure, and it gives you all of that power. And so from a developer's perspective, like, a Mac is a great machine, but also, other creative professionals, whether they're designers or audiovisual folks, or in a lot of cases in the enterprise, leaders in the enterprise, the people who are responsible for, the business direction and things like that, they'll choose a Mac. And eventually it kind of catches on within the organization that more and more people want Macs. And what I've seen is that as soon as companies start to allow device choice, we see a lot more interest from them. So many of our customers come from a Windows background where they have lots and lots of Windows devices, but their engineers all use Macs. And it's like this anomaly in their environment. Like, how do I manage this thing? And not only is it, managing the software, but especially like developer stuff. There are a handful of, I don't know if I would call them competitors, but there are a handful of products on the market that have overlap with some of the things that we do. But none of them give developer tools first-class treatment. And so with Homebrew, developer tools have first-class treatment, and with Workbrew, you get the same, right? And so as we see more and more of these companies, adopting more and more Macs, it starts with the engineers, but ultimately what we're able to do is give them, the company app store, right? Like every single approved piece of software that you would install on your Mac is available in one place. It's centrally managed. We can keep it up to date. We can patch it for you. We have functionality around detecting applications on the device that are not managed by Brew, letting you know that they're not managed by Brew, but they could be, and then adopting them and saying, for example, this instance of 1Password on the device was installed by downloading it, but we have a 1Password package in Brew that you could install with Brew install 1Password. So we'll suggest that to you and let you kind of manage it. So, kind of the thing that I'm seeing over and over again is that some small subset of users has a Mac, and there's like a pivotal point that happens where they say everybody can have a Mac, or when you get your next machine, you can choose a Mac. And when companies do that, they come knocking on our door very, very regularly.
I love that, because I never even really considered you all as part of that choice, journey where you can help make Apple easier in employee choice. And I think that's really exciting for you all. If you don't have any friends at Apple, definitely make some, because I know if you can help make their jobs a little easier, deploying Apple devices and making them easier to fit in environments, right? Like that's one of our taglines as far as, hey, we help make Apple a lot easier in environments, and sounds like you do the same, which is really,
our whole
really
team
exciting.
is a bunch of Apple fans, as you would expect.
We would hope so. We would hope so. So, final question for you. So let's say we have listeners that perhaps are hearing about you for the first time. How can they get started with Workbrew today? Or maybe they're on Homebrew and they want to get started with Workbrew. Like, what do they need to do so they can get up and running?
So it's really easy. The first thing you can do is just go to workbrew.com. From the website, there's a section where you can contact us. You can schedule a demo right off the bat if you want to talk about features, ask any questions. There's a good chance that conversation will be with me. So, feel free to come and say hi. But also, I wanted to make sure that I call out that we have a free plan. And our free plan is not a trial. It's a full-fledged, free tier offering. And so what you get with Workbrew Free is the ability to install Workbrew on any number of devices and use it with any number of users to get standardized deployment of Brew. So it works with your MDM, Jamf. You can deploy it out to all your devices, put it in self-service. It also gives you, that sudo-less access, so standard user access to Brew. And it also gives you visibility into every single package installed across your fleet. So if nothing else, I would strongly encourage all of the listeners who this would be relevant to go use Workbrew Free. Get visibility into all the packages you have out there, see what versions you have, and have a standard way to get Brew to your users. Additionally, in the free plan, we do give you the ability to set default installed packages across the whole fleet. So you can say, for example, I have these 15 or 20 packages I want installed on every machine. You set them up, and that's all free. Beyond that, if you want to do any of the remote management, get vulnerability alerts, patching, have access to do things like automations, you can upgrade to one of our paid plans. Workbrew Pro, self-service right on the website. You just punch in a credit card and get going with that. And if you're a larger company that needs a little bit of time to onboard or whatnot, you can get in touch with us and we can do a pilot with you, get you access to all the enterprise features to try it out. So really the easiest thing to do is just go to workbrew.com and click sign up.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Josh, anything from you before we part with our new friend, John?
No, first off, thank you so much for joining us, John. I think this is certainly solving a problem for a lot of folks that hits close to home. And so my ask for any listener out there is, if you are currently a Homebrew user, here is your reminder: go run Brew Update, Brew Upgrade. But while that's downloading, take some time and go to workbrew.com, check out everything that they offer, and give it a shot, because I think that this is certainly solving problems for a lot of folks. So we want to make sure you give it a gander.
I love that. Thank you again for being here, John. I love that this integrates so seamlessly with Jamf and our products. So yeah, Josh, another one on the books.
You know it. And as always, Jamf After Dark is a podcast from Jamf. It's copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Technical details and product offerings may change at any time, so always check jamf.com for the latest information on our products and services.
You can reach out to us if you have any questions or comments or even suggested show topics. And of course, we love fan mail. All you need to do is send a friendly email to info@jamf.com with the subject line "Attention to the Podcast." We are also a sponsor of the Mac Admins Foundation, and many of us are available on the Mac Admins Slack channel. And of course, if you need support, visit Jamf account to get a conversation started or open up a ticket and get your technical questions answered.
Yes, and when it comes to Mac admins, Workbrew also has a channel there as well, so you can hop on in if you want to engage in the community. And again, a huge special thanks to you, John, for being here. Special thanks to our audio and video engineers, Merlin and Martin, who help us sound great and look great. Until next time, for Kat Garbus, I'm Josh Thornton.
And for Josh Thornton, I'm Kat Garbus. We will catch you after dark again. Good night, goodbye, good morning, and thank you for listening.